Achtung, Achtung, Christmas is a-coming, dear listeners. And to quote Richard Chaplow, 26 appearances, 9 subs, 1 goal, as he once said, you cannot beat a good board game. And we've got a good board game for you here. Achtung has teamed up with a tremendous football trivial pursuit style game called Pundit. You can follow Pundit at Pundit Games on Twitter. And it's a really nice little game, actually. It's a board game. It consists of football trivia questions, easy and hard. Some of the hard ones are very, very hard. And you move along a football pitch to score goals against your opponent. It will suit the football head in your life, dear listeners. Great way to pass a Christmas afternoon. You can get a 10% discount if you visit punditgames.co.uk at PUNDIT GAMES, punditgames.co.uk. Get a 10% discount at checkout with the code LIONS in capital letters. Lions, capital letters. And every sale will benefit the Lions Food Hub. What a better way to pass your Christmas than to enjoy a good football trivia game and to know you're doing good at the same time. So get on it. punditgames.co.uk.
Hi, it's Mr. Bye for Now from Millwall Football Club, and you're listening to the world famous Achtung Millwall.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Listed Lions, Achtung Mill's Listed Lions, a favourite show, and I'm hoping a really good guest today. It's lovely to be able to speak to him at last. It's Jim Hackett. How you doing, Jim?
All right, Nick. Lovely to be here. Lovely to see you, and looking forward to this. Yeah.
Listeners need to know we've been trying to put this together for a little while now, and for reasons that are too deep to go into, it hasn't quite come off. But it's great to actually see you and meet you now, Jim.
Yeah.
So welcome to the show. Yes, I see that you're very, very well tanned, mate. You look like you've just come back from an exotic foreign location. Where you been?
Yeah, I just come back from a week in Dubai, Nick. So it was
Very nice.
fantastic,
Very nice.
fantastic weather. Stayed in a lovely hotel, ruined by the foreign supporters of Argentina. It was like you can have 3,000 people in the hotel, and 2,500 are either Welsh or Argentinian. So
that's grim.
And I don't know what they packed, but all they did was walk around in football shirts. So they were, and most of them were a little bit too grown up to wear football shirts. So it was.
I think there's an age limit, mate.
Yeah.
I think with a modern football shirt with the figure hugging materials they use now, it's not a good idea. How was you? I mean, obviously you weren't in Qatar. You would have seen quite a lot of the World Cup, I'm guessing, and obviously you've had the Welsh and the Argentines on hand. We were just saying off air, Jim, weren't we? My impression, I've not been anywhere other than my TV screen for this World Cup, but it feels like a different World Cup in the sense of no aggravation that I've seen anyway. I haven't seen any social media on there, which is I don't know, is it a good thing? I suppose it is a good thing and a bad thing perhaps because it takes away a bit of an edge.
Well, there was
a tournament.
There was opportunities during the week I was in Dubai where it could have got a little bit tasty because obviously the Welsh aren't backwards at voicing their dislike of England. The Argentinians weren't a problem. It was mainly the Welsh, and I think the good thing with the English there, we had the upper hand because of the first game. The fact that we drew with America, I think, helped things. But there was not confrontation, but there was a lot of banter. And it was getting a little bit tidy, as the game was going on, and have all these Welsh buddy supporters chanting USA, and as the game went on, when we got away with a draw, I think everybody was quite happy, and it was lively, and it could have got livelier, but it didn't really, which was a good job.
Good. I mean, obviously in Qatar, I'm going to guess different laws to Dubai in terms of drinking because the stories we've picked up is it's been quite difficult. 1 or 2 spots in Qatar apparently where you can get a beer. But what's it like in Dubai in that sense? Do you have bars? Is it pubs? Or is it
hotels have got
restricted?
bars. It's very expensive, but I'll go back to the hotel I stayed in. It was all inclusive. So there wasn't a restriction, if you like. Everybody could drink as much as they wanted throughout the day, throughout the night. So a lot of the time, the Welsh supporters, the Argentinians, whatever, they would fly out of Dubai early morning, get their afternoon game, and be back in Dubai for the evening so they could get on it. And obviously that was all part of the pleasure for them. And the only sort of the only plus that we had was that Argentina got beat in their first game. The Welsh obviously had their troubles, so it didn't get too far into it. We had the moral high ground from the off, and
drinking for consolation after the other night against England. I mean, I thought it was a pretty routine win for us, really, Jim, the other night.
Well, I had to listen to it because we flew back, and the game kicked off while I was at Manchester Airport. I don't know if you've ever been to Manchester Airport. It's the
I have actually,
scummiest airport in Britain.
It was very nice.
And I had to stand there waiting, and as soon as I got my luggage, just got outside, and England scored. So I listened to it on the way home. I got the last 20 minutes, so I got one of the goals. But yeah, I think it's a difficult time. I think we went from the elation of the first game to the misery of the second game, and then the hope of the third game that came true. So we've only got Senegal now, haven't we? So it's not a problem.
I thought they looked quite a strong side, to be honest with you. What I saw of them, and who they beat Ecuador, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I thought they looked quite a decent side,
which might help us. Though I think that'll help us. I think teams that will come at us will benefit us. I think it's where we're expected to win, and we've got to go at teams. I think we really struggle because everything slows down, doesn't it? But I think with a bit of pace in the game, we should be okay.
Yeah, that's what the Welsh did, didn't they? I mean, they sat back very much, and Harry in our WhatsApp group described Wales as a League Two side, but a League Two side that sits back does create an obstacle which you have to break down. We did break them down, and that's all to the good. But I think you're right. Senegal's got one or two Premier League level players in there, so maybe they'll come at us, and that'll open up spaces. I hope. Anyway, we'll see on Sunday.
And you know what? It's a game where sort of we've got into a round that we expected to, and anything from here is a bonus, isn't it? If we got knocked out,
I think so.
It'll be Southgate's fault. It's very much like being a Millwall supporter, isn't it? When it goes tits up, it's Gary Rowett's fault. When it goes well, they're a fantastic team.
It's down to the talent of the players. He has Rowett kind of similarities, Southgate, in terms of playing style. Anyway, I must admit, after that opening game where we put 6 past Iran, I thought, well, maybe we're really going to go for it. Maybe we're playing with the handbrake off, as the cliche has it. But he does seem to like his handbrake, doesn't he? I suppose he gets success. It gets you to a certain point in the game, doesn't it?
It's a modern manager, though, isn't it? A lot of them they play not to lose rather than go for the win from the off. And I think successful teams never play with the handbrake on, do they? You never see the Brazilians sort of fanning around with it. And I think being a Millwall supporter for so long, very few teams that we've had that you can remember that they just play with that freedom that got success. But when they did, when they got,
it stands out in your memory, doesn't it? I mean, as a club, I mean, we're obviously here today talking about Millwall primarily, but I mean, I'll make you right. I think there are similarities with England in the sense you always have a sense that we should be maybe yearn for something a bit more than what we get half the time, but. There we are. But the reason we've got Jim on the show, listeners, is because he is a listed Lion, and we want to hear about Jim's story as a Millwall fan. So Jim Hackett, as you know, I mean, I've got a list of questions. Whenever I look at my list of questions, I think I've got to update these, Jim, because we know your name already. Yeah. Let's go to your first Millwall game. How long have you been a Millwall fan? What was your first game?
The first game, and I'm not sure if it was my first game, but the first game I can ever remember, I think we played Sheffield United it must have been 70, 71, something like that.
Right.
And I'd moved because I grew up in, well, that's how I grew up. I was in care for a few years, and I moved to Waterloo. Right. When we came out of the home, me and my sister and my mum moved to Waterloo for a couple of years, and then moved to Elephant Castle when I was about 9, I think. And then from there, I didn't have a football team at that time because it wasn't sort of part of my sort of lifestyle. Yeah. So, but then I got there, and suddenly I lived on the Rockingham estate, and there was loads of lads, loads of Irish kids, loads of West Indian kids, and we all sort of grew up together. And picking a team at that point was important, and a lot of them were surprisingly, Liverpool supporters or Man United supporters. I had a good friend who was a Fulham supporter, and I just couldn't bring myself to to go for anybody that was away from where I live. So I looked for a local team, and it was Millwall. So I hung on to it at that point, and people couldn't understand, even though I lived close there, they couldn't understand why I wanted to be a Millwall supporter. But I thought I'd pick them because they're local, and I then had the opportunity to go.
Did you pick them?
Yeah, I picked
them.
Did
you pick them before you went?
Yeah,
did you?
I picked them before I went, and
wow.
And then, like I say, this lad who was a Fulham supporter, he's got his own story, if you like, in future years. He ended up being a copper, and he now lives in Benidorm and works as a comedy act called Cock Robin, which again, I've got, but I only found this out recently. So
that's got to be another story.
So he was a Fulham supporter, and he said, why don't we do this? So we'll go to Fulham one week when they're at home. We'll go to Millwall the following week when they're at home. And we did that for a little while. But the first game I can remember was Sheffield United, where we got a win. And it was... I couldn't understand why we wouldn't win anyway. But it's only as I sort of later on in life, I realised you don't always win your own games. But we went, and I walked in there, and it was interesting, for a young lad. I think I must have been 11, maybe 12, and it was absolutely fantastic. And after that, I never lost that love of going and watch Millwall, and probably had the worst 90 minutes of my every week was going to the game, because it was just, and it was a period, I suppose, where there was a lot of carnage going on. Going to a football game wasn't just a matter of going to a football game. It was going to a football game, trying to stay safe, trying to watch what was going on at the same time, being aware of everything. Because at that point, you could sort of get from one end of the ground to the other, and there used to be a lot of people running from one end of the ground to the other for some reason, and it weren't always Millwall supporters. It was a real interesting time to be young, and it was like formative years. I think when I was 14, 15, suddenly the Cold Blow Lane looks a little bit more interesting than it had done previously. So I used to go there and just try and get to the front wherever I was, and then gradually, as I was getting a little bit older and things were going on, I thought, that's the place to be. And if you're going to be safe, be in the Cold Blow Lane. And although there was lots of problems, it was a good place to be.
It's quite interesting. I mean, I often think this, and again, maybe it's the effect of getting older and advanced years. I mean, we've got family now, got a nephew aged, what is he now, 15, 14 going to 15. And I don't know about you, Jim, but I feel quite lucky to have been brought up in an era where, I went with mates, similar kind, not same backstory, but I went to the Den when I was 11, 10. We just took off with some mates, aged a similar age. We went to the football on the train, walked through New Cross, and came back later, in the evening. You wouldn't dream of letting your kids do that now, but I do think there was something valuable in it, despite all the dangers that I recognise when I listen to what you've just described, because you get open fist fights going on terraces back. It weren't all the time, but it happened. I remember seeing it. And there was a sense of danger mixed with it, thrill and excitement that you went to football. I don't know. It's hard to put your finger. I wouldn't dream of letting my kids now.
No, I think it's an age thing as well, Nick. I think it's those formative years where you're discovering yourself as well as everything else is going around. One of my earliest memories at Millwall was they played against Nottingham Forest, and whatever happened before the game, and suddenly this Forest supporter jumped over the barrier from his end, if you like, and he got chased all the length of the pitch by a big lad, a Millwall supporter. And it was like watching the Olympic 100 metres. This guy, he had a 10-yard start, and gradually, as he got towards our end, this a panther grabbed hold of him, and he's pummeling him. The stewards obviously couldn't get anywhere near him, and by the time the cheers and everything, it was like the cup final. It was fantastic.
It was akin to a gladiatorial arena. I can see how the Roman Empire had that as a spectacle. But I mean, it's weird when you look back in that way. But there we are. I mean, so you just said you went on the CBL. Back then, you could go all around the ground, Jim.
Yeah.
You could walk from one end to the other at half time. Many did, didn't they?
And that's how it was.
Or for trouble, from one end to the other, Did you ever go in the seats? Did you ever go in the seating area?
No, it was that was You had to pay money for that, didn't you? I mean,
Yeah, well,
I used
yeah.
to try and pay as little as possible to go anywhere, and going to Millwall was about getting in as cheap as possible and trying to find your way around. And I used to look at people in the seats with envy, because they could actually sit there and watch a game without any sort of distorted
Yeah.
views.
The thing with it, I used to love to pay. It had a little turnstile. I think I must have said this many times. Apologies to listeners for the same old stories. But they used to have a little turnstile inside the ground. Very odd arrangement. You could pay extra money and go into the forecourt seats, the ones at the front, the
Right.
orange ones, And I used to do that as if I had enough money. I used to treat myself. I've always been a great believer in treating myself, Jim, through my life. So I used to go and sit
Yeah.
but you still got problems in there. I mean, again, you couldn't escape it at the den. You'd always get something would kick off in there.
It was a harsh
It would
environment.
happen.
The whole den used to be a harsh environment, I think. And
It was it was a harsh arena, wasn't it?
it
Yeah.
was an acceptable part of the life, at the time. The funny thing was, I used to go, and as I got to sort of 13, 14, 15, I had a mate who lived very
Mm.
close to the ground, and he used to leave 10 minutes early because he had to sell.
Okay.
He had to sell the old is it Evening Standard, London Standard, whatever it was,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he
yeah.
used to be on the bridge on the Old Kent Road, and he used to have to
With the
he used to have to
results.
stand there. He'd collect the papers as he
Right.
got dropped off, and then he'd sell them to passers-by, or cars used to stop and buy a paper off him. So I used to leave with him at the same time, just sort of get on a bus to get home before the crowd sort of. So it was a
This is a right reminiscent vestige, isn't it? I mean, that's the papers, the result papers, an aspect of life that's gone completely. I mean, it does sound like the Victorian era when you
yeah,
used to wait with bated breath for the arrival of the evening news with the football results on them on the Saturday evening. Often with half filled out match reports because they couldn't complete them in
yeah.
time before the print
But
run.
nobody
But
knew
there
the
we are.
results, did they? And that's how it was. It was
No, you didn't know the results. There was no way. If you missed the radio, they used to have them on Radio 2, I think, didn't they? And if you missed that, you had to wait till the next day in the Sunday papers. Then you wouldn't know what the results were. Do you look back on the old den with fondness, Jim? I mean,
yeah.
I think it's hard not to, as
I
anyone
loved
of
it.
our era.
I was very lucky when I played the South London Schoolboys, and we had a game there, and I couldn't.
Oh,
I
right.
think it was against Lincoln Schools or something like that. But just getting on the pitch and if you like a professional ground as minging and dirty and horrible as it was just a
Yeah.
fantastic place to be. And I used to go there even if there was a reserve game. Occasionally, I'd go on my own from where I live. I'd get a bus up there and just go in and watch a reserve game. So I just loved it, the whole smell of the place, the environment. It's just a fantastic place to
Yeah.
be. And it was a shame. Obviously, it was obvious once it went. But it was a shame that it wasn't seen as a more of a focal point, I suppose.
Yeah, I always find it strange. You see it with other grounds, but obviously the Den being ours, the way these places of real note and entertainment can just disappear, and that's what happened with Coldblow Lane.
Yeah,
Built this very nondescript Fairview Homes estate on it. Nothing against those people that bought there, but there was really nothing. We managed to get a plaque put up there just to mark it. I thought it was not wrong for it not to be marked at all, because none of the road names there reflects the fact that was where on the great football
yeah,
stadiums of the game once was. It's very odd how the way that was done. It just disappeared. It's quite weird. How do you like the new Den? I mean, I love it as a football stadium. It don't compare with the old one, but I like it. Do you like the new place?
yeah.
The new place, 30 years old now.
Well, it's
Isn't it?
funny, isn't it? A certain generation will still call it the new Den.
Yeah,
I think the other generation will just call it the Den. But
the Den.
it's
Yeah,
the first time I went there, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, was a playoff game against Wigan. I took my lad there, and that was the
yeah.
first time I'd seen it, and I couldn't believe how modern and swish it was, compared to the old ground. And I thought,
Yeah.
this is the future of football. Then, fantastic. And you go in and everybody has a view.
I went to the Sporting Lisbon friendly. I'd left it late getting a ticket. And I managed to squeeze in on the lower tier right at the very end. But my jaw dropped when I walked in there, Jim. So I used to
Yeah.
live nearby, and you watched it being constructed, the bare bones of it, but you don't quite absorb what it's going to look like on the inside until you get in there. And I was quite breathtaking that we'd achieved it. It felt like Millwall transformed itself into something unfamiliar
Oh, yeah.
at first. I don't know if that makes sense after Coldblow Lane.
Well, they started playing England under 21 games there, didn't they? Things like that,
Yeah.
something that we never had. in our
No.
in our history. Like suddenly it was a
They
focal point for
stopped. I
the
don't know
team.
why.
Yeah.
Why would that be? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think it was quite something to. I mean, Reg Burr was obviously we mentioned him a few times on these
No.
shows, but I mean, it was a massive achievement what he pulled off there, keeping us so close to home. And if we have to move, it's better that we are still just a couple of 100 yards away from our
Yeah.
real ground, as it still feels to me.
I don't think it'd happen again, would it? Again, there's very few
Be
new
out,
football
wouldn't it?
grounds now that get away with being so local when
No,
they've got
Arsenal did
massive.
it, didn't they? The Emirates, they did
Yeah,
it, but
Uh,
very, very difficult.
yeah, but I think it's. I mean, if you're going to spend the sort of money they would have spent on the ground compared to what we'd have spent on a new ground, you've probably got a chance. But I think the modern stadiums now, they're as lovely as they are. They're not generally in the middle of their population, are they?
Achtung, Millwall.
But there we are. I think we sold the Den probably at the worst possible time because there was a property slump, I think, in the early 90s. I'm sure we didn't get all that. The sale of Coldblow Lane funded the construction of the new place, but there we are. That was what it was.
Well, somebody benefited.
Let's move on to. we probably can't explore that without committing the crime of libel. Your favourite all-time player. You've been around since just a bit longer than me, Jim. So who would you pick as your favourite
I did think
ever
about
Millwall
this, yeah.
player?
I think after my era, I suppose my first sort of guy was Keith Weller. I used to look at Keith Weller as a bronze god amongst some fantastic players, but he was the one that stood out for me in those days. Then obviously I had Gordon Hill. Gordon Hill was
great winger, wasn't he?
Fantastic. And the trouble, we didn't have him long enough. It was one of the things that the club always took money, for good players at that time that possibly could have been the ones that pushed us on a little bit. So there was him and Weller. I think I loved obviously Teddy Sheringham because he was at the time he was Millwall through and through. He was, a player that was so unusual for a Millwall type player that that I think it was impossible not to love him at the time. I think, but my favourite, I think, really was a guy called Alan Dorney. I don't know if you remember him.
I remember Alan Dorney, a defender.
Absolutely,
very elegant.
He was
defender.
So majestic that because I used to play. In fact, when I started playing, it was the old was it 3-5-2 that thing? Where not 3-5-2. The W formation, and I was a right half. And he was a player that you look at and you think, God, how could he do that? He was just so cultured, and he would play balls into feet and balls into space and know what he was doing. At the same time, he could put a foot in, he could defend and win the ball. Yeah. And I think he never got the credit he deserved, but he was a fantastic player. So I would put my all-time favourite probably as Dorney, only because
that's a very unusual choice.
Because I'm from a generation that can remember him, and he had an effect on me, and I mean, there's so many others you could throw in there. I think Tim Cahill's one that you could put in the box, as being unusual for a Millwall player. There's so many of them, and you go through a different generation. I mean, we went through a generation where there was very little sort of a spark about Millwall. There's very little to get too excited about, but we've had different teams over the years. So yeah, I'd go for Dorney only because of the effect he had on me as a young player, I think.
That's a great choice because I mean, obviously at that time I started going. Dorney was a mainstay of the defence. Alan Dorney alongside Barry Kitchener and Dennis Burnett in front. I mean, I'd say Dorney and Burnett were both elegant in a way that you don't. Kitch, and I love Kitch. He'd be my choice of favourite ever player, but he was much more the big bustling centre half, the kind of player you would associate with the name and brand, modern term, of Millwall. Whereas both Dennis Burnett and Alan Dorney were probably not. They weren't your traditional Millwall players in the sense of they picked their passes, as you said, and they were good tacklers without being. Dirty players, if that
they were cultured, weren't they? Culture. I mean, Burnett was a great player.
That's the right term. Yeah. So a good choice, unusual choice, if I may say so.
Sorry about
that. I like.
I'm ruining it.
I like. No. We love the unusual choices. You've picked out a few names there. Great players each.
Yeah.
Sheringham, Cahill, Dorney. But we must always have the other side of the coin, Mr. Hackett, and that is your worst choice of worst ever Millwall player. I mean, it's always unfair.
I've struggled with it, honestly, because I think being a Millwall supporter, you can hate players for different reasons and
irrational reasons.
But I can't, because I joined the army in 1976, and sort of between 1976 and 93, I was rarely in the UK, so I didn't really get to see the club. So I can't pick players out of that era.
No. Okay.
Then when I came back and lived back in the UK in 93, from then it was very difficult to get down, because I live up in North Wales, so to get down and see Millwall was difficult. So, and I've never been one for jumping on players' backs and moaning at them. So I always think, I mean, any professional footballer is a better player than I ever was. And to call them so, the worst. True, I struggle with the worst ever Millwall player, because I think they've all had something. I wish there was one I could remember hating, and the only ones I can remember hating after they've left Millwall, and for different reasons, the reason they've left, or and
go on, they'll do. Go on, we've got to have a choice of some sort. They'll do.
Go on, I'll go for Graben then. he's an easy pick, but
he's an easy pick.
And I did watch him live, and I thought
he's a very talented.
I thought he's got some at him, and
yeah.
And then you're just waiting for it all the time, and I was waiting, and he never showed enough of it until he went somewhere else, and then suddenly he goes other places, and he uses us as a bloody goalkeeper's net, doesn't he? But he never stopped scoring. But and again, I think he got harshly treated in Calvin's book, but at the same time,
he did.
At the same time, there's a lot of truth in the whole book, so it's just life, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Lewis, I used to like him, but I think he went through a difficult phase in his, the Den can be a harsh. I mean, we've said it already, Jim.
Yeah,
it's a harsh arena, isn't it, to make a living in the game, and for some reason, some players just aren't taken to by the Millwall crowd.
Well, it's not a ground to grow up in, Nick, is it? You're not going to, if you can get your growing up years in at Millwall, you either succeed or fail, and if you fail, you don't really get them. You go somewhere else and get them.
I do worry about Tyler Bury, who I think is also clearly also a talented boy. I'm just reading before we came online here about how he's not been well lately, and I do worry that he's on the. I think he's still seen as a talent, but that doesn't always endear you to the Den crowd, Jim, does it?
No.
It can go the other way quite fast, Well,
I think he had his surprise factor, didn't he? When he came along and suddenly looked like something we were missing and we needed. And every now and then he shows that little spark, and you think, thank fuck for that. He's got something, and then he disappears again, and he can play 90 minutes and just not perform, or he can play 10 minutes and have a worldie. It's a difficult one.
I think we struggle with flair players, Jim. I think it's flair, because flair comes and goes, doesn't it? They're always a little bit mercurial. That you get a good game, you get a bad game, maybe you get a little run of nothing, and then you get something brilliant. We've had a few over the years, and they've never truly. There's something, I don't know. Maybe it's an innately working class club in that way that unless you're sweating blood for the club, you're not fully trusted. Maybe there's something of that in it.
Well, I think there's you just want 100%, Nick, and some people give off the impression that their 100% isn't quite what everybody else's 100% is. It might be 100%, but if that's all it is, it's not very good. You just want that spark there. You want to see. Bury, when he gets the ball, you just want to see him push the ball past the player, beat him for pace, either get a cross or a shot, and just do that 4 or 5 times in a game, and it will be enough. But sometimes he goes through a whole game not doing it at all.
I think it's where players give you a sense that they've not given up. That's the wrong way to put it. But I think if it doesn't work first time, then there's a slight loss of spirit, and I think that can erode in all directions, especially at the Den, which is not a forgiving arena.
Yeah.
By anyone's measure,
No, I think you're right. Though. I think with Bury, I think that as painful as it is, that the jury's going to be out on him still for a while. Until he puts a run of 4 or 5 games together that sparks. And some players can do it, and some players can't, like you say. So let's hope he can.
Your most memorable match, Jim? Who would you pick as your over the course of your Mill supporting years? You can pick one out.
I can,
Or
I can,
a couple.
I can only pick the same one as everybody else, I think, which is the Sunderland semi-final. I think,
Yeah,
because I live up this sort of this way. I live about an hour from Manchester, so I bought tickets off online. I think I bought them. It cost me about £250 each for me and my lad, and we went there, and I never had a game. You know, all the years of supporting Millwall, it was like a cup final on its own, wasn't it? And it was just so I don't know, nervous, tension, everything that goes with it. You know, just watching that. As soon as we got the goal, it was like, oh fuck, what happens now? You know, it's because it's that hope that kills you, but at the same time,
absolutely.
I thought that day. I thought we were fantastic, and we probably weren't if you were watching as a neutral. It wasn't that sort of game, but I thought we were absolutely magnificent. You know, Muscat and, you know, the goal, everything that goes with it. I thought even Marshall and goal, everything that we did sort of come off, and then McAteer got sent off. They had Kevin Kyle up front for Sunderland, who was a generally good player, and whatever did it, you know, it just went on forever and ever, and then the final whistle went, and I'd never seen Millwall supporters like that in my life. You know, just being part of it.
To be in a cup final, I mean, it was unthinkable, Jim.
Oh.
And when you and I started going in the early 70s, if somebody had said, we'll go to an FA Cup final, we'll qualify for Europe, you know, I thought you lost the plot. You know, I mean, it's just, it wasn't on the Millwall agenda, was it?
No.
It just didn't happen to us.
Well, we weren't that kind of club. I spent the following day just listening to Talk Sport all day, just to get the comments, you know, just so that everybody was sort of applauding Millwall for getting there, because it was magnificent achievement, and going to the final. You know, even if you take away the injuries, suspensions, and everything we had, you know, in the team we put out, the cup final really was just a bonus. It was the semi-final was the cup final, and to
have made it,
and to watch it with my lad, you know, it was absolutely fantastic, and everybody's hugging each other. And it took me an hour to get there, and it took me about 4 hours to get back. The traffic was shocking, but it didn't matter, did it? Because we had something to talk about and just rejoicing and listen to on the radio. But
and you could listen to the radio, that's right, in the car. But absolutely,
that was a fantastic match. You know, and again, I'll go back to somewhat ironic. A friend of mine, a lad who used to play for me years ago, he was a physio at the Millwall Academy at the time, and I just happened to ring him up after the game, and he said, "Do you want any tickets for the final?" And I just paid £500 for 2 tickets. I said, "Could you have got me tickets for these?" He said, "Yeah." So I got 2 tickets for the final off him. But that was fantastic.
It's interesting. I mean, I mean these games. I mean, so many of us, and I'd probably say the same myself. If you want one game, but I often thought afterwards that point you made. I bet it weren't a very good game for a neutral to watch, because I remember seeing the Sky potted highlights. I thought that didn't go on for very long. That little potted highlight, because there wasn't much in a way of was that much to show, you know. But from our point of view, it was an endless journey towards the golden land.
Oh God, yeah. Once that goal went in, it was. Can we keep the ball out of our net? Wasn't it? It didn't matter, you know.
We just about did. Yeah,
absolutely fantastic day.
I remember Danny Dicchio missing a chance late in the game. I think he put it over the bar, a header. But there we are. Oh, great days. Similar kind of question, Jim. I mean, I don't know if you can separate the two. Your favourite Millwall moment, would that be the same as the semi-final, or would you choose a different moment?
I've got a different moment in terms of my favourite moment, because it was, I think, for me, it was taking my son to Millwall, really. I took him to, I said about the Wigan playoff game a couple of years before that, and I think we were coming out of the first division into the championship, and I think I took him there, and we turned up nice and early. We travelled all the way down from where I live now. So it took about 5 hours to get there. Parked the car up close to the ground, which you could do then. Got in the ground, got in our seats, and we were right at the end of the stand where you've got the away supporters on the left-hand side. So is that the west stand?
Yeah.
Is that the west stand?
The north stand is where the away fans go.
So what's the stand next to it on the side?
The west. Yeah. West. It could be the east, but probably the west. Your description.
So we were sat in there, and obviously the 200 Wigan supporters turned up, you know, because there wasn't many of them. And me and my lad were there, and there was loads of space around us. And I thought, that'd be a nice, interesting watching game. And about 5 minutes before the game kicked off, suddenly we just got surrounded by all these pissed up Millwall supporters. And this is the first game I'd ever been with my lad, and I think he was about 13 or 14. So we then spent 90 minutes because they went for a couple of pints at half time, but we spent 90 minutes being surrounded by these lads. All they did, they ignored the game, just slaughtered these Wigan supporters. And I'm sat there thinking, he must think this is harsh, I couldn't say anything, so these lads just get. And at the end of the game, they all buggered off, and I sat there. So I then said, "I'm sorry about that." I said, "How did you find it?"
Yeah.
He said, "That it was fantastic." And
that's the thing, isn't it?
His memory of Millwall now, or his start of his memories of Millwall, were that game and these people, and how vicious it all was, I suppose, But for him, it was exciting and so unusual because he was obviously protected from that sort of life. But
that's the thing. It's an interesting point, and I'd say I have a very similar story because I was living over in Wandsworth with my ex-partner. I took her boy along to Mill. He was aged about 10, 11. Like, he liked football, like kids do, but he'd never been. And I took him when we were in the 3rd division days, or the League 2 or whatever it was called then. But we played Fulham, and a game. But I sat him in the lower, a bit similar to the story you've just described with your son. But I was responsible for this 10-year-old. He hadn't had a sheltered life, but he hadn't been to Mill versus Fulham, and there's blokes effing and blinding at the referee. At Keegan was managing them, and it was just like this relentless, very Millwall atmosphere of open, naked hostility towards Fulham, who I think were going through a phase of having a lot of money with Keegan, and they're looking to buy their way out of the division. And the same thing. I thought, oh blimey, I bet he's had his a shock to the system there after 90 minutes of what would be a full-on local derby atmosphere. And I said to him as he was going back to the car, "How'd you find it, James?" He said, it was really good. He said, "But I don't think you should bring Mum down here." No, I don't think I should. I never crossed my mind to bring her there. But it's just interesting because I mean, we've both described those early 70s experiences where you kind of exposed to a fairly harsh environment. But once you get that plugged into that electricity, and like the two kids there, yours and him. There's an addictive quality to it, isn't there?
Well,
you keep coming.
It's an acquired taste, Nick, isn't it? I think it's an acquired taste that the younger you get it, the better it tastes. Well, I took my missus last year. We came down to watch the.
Oh, did you?
We came down to watch the Reading game last year, and I got we sat at the Coldblow Lane end as it is now. And we were about 3 rows in. And there was loads of space because obviously it wasn't packed out for the game.
It gets, yeah.
And we sat there, and about 2 rows back were 2 blokes. And I was watching the game, and my missus couldn't stop listening to these 2 blokes because when there was not a lot going on, they were having a normal conversation about their working day and their week. But every time the ball was going sort of close to this end, they get up and give it, "You fucking wanker!" And then as soon as the ball would get cleared away, they sit down and have a chat.
Back to normal.
So my missus spent the 90 minutes watching these 2 lads, and she said, "What a strange place to come to chat about your day and then get so angry about everything." And we won 1-0, so it didn't matter.
I'm sure there's a social kind of documentary to be made about that, but I think it's a very good point. I mean, I think half the theatre of it, Jim, is what goes on around you at the den, isn't it? As much as the football. It's actually something I've always tried to capture a little bit doing these podcasts, if as far as you ever can do. But I think that's great. I like that story. There we are. Who's your current favourite Millwall player in the current squad? Who would you pick out as a favourite?
I think if you're looking at the last 6 weeks, you'd go for Fleming, wouldn't you? I think
Zian.
Yeah, over time, and a player I really like, and I think he's blown hot and cold in terms of where the supporters are with him. I like Ryan Leonard. I think he's a sort of player that if he stayed fit, he would be number 1 on the team sheet week in, week out. And I think the way things are now, I think Billy Mitchell is suddenly coming into his own. And I just hope this break hasn't sort of burst his bubble a bit. And and he's got to find that form again, because I thought his form over the last 4 or 5 games has been fantastic. And
Yeah.
with him and Saville in there, been brilliant. But I think it's difficult to look past Fleming for what he's doing at the moment, because I think we were saying before about flair players don't seem to do as well at the game. I think we've got a flair player there who's got a little bit more about himself, and probably he could be a standout player for us, for a couple of seasons. But the chances are, if he is a standout player for us, he won't be here a couple of seasons. So I think if I was going to be honest, I like the Ryan Leonard type of player. I like the Billy Mitchell sort of player. So I'd probably have one of them too. And given his age, I'd have Billy Mitchell as my favourite player, because I think Fleming will be on his way somewhere, and we won't have had that long to have him as a Millwall legend type player. Whereas Mitchell, if he keeps playing like he is, he could go somewhere. But I think he'll always be a Millwall player, and somebody we'll always have a lot of love for.
Yeah, no, I really do like the look of Billy as he improves, and he's acquired a maturity, if that's the right term, to his play this season particularly. So I'm hoping that that's working with the likes of Gary Rowett and the coaching staff. That's really added depth to his game. I like Murray Wallace as well. I think for a player of limited. I've got was it the Paddington Bear, the bear of little brain, the player of limited means. I think he maximises himself so well, Jim.
I think that's the difference, Nick. Yeah, I think there you go. Somebody like him, he hasn't got a handbrake to put on, because I think he's giving everything that he's got, so he can't restrict himself, and he'll make mistakes. But at the same time, I think he's a player that everybody can identify with. He's a working man's type player, isn't he? Rather than as somebody who's come from a little bit of a better education,
No, I agree.
It could be with Billy, It might be that Billy's handbrake cable's broke or something, and he's actually having a bit of freedom that he probably wasn't given, but he's performing probably at a level he's never played in the past, but he looks comfortable with it, doesn't he?
I can't believe Billy's brother plays for Charlton. I mean, that's going back to the Charlton brothers, isn't it? Playing for different clubs.
I remember you did a chat with his dad, didn't you, once? And
Paul, or Mitch,
and he was saying, wasn't Billy at Charlton at one point? And
I think they might have come through the same system. They didn't take him on.
And what a bonus that is for us. And you never know, the other one might come as well if he wakes up one morning and realises
if he's got any sense
what a toss club he's with.
Club that's adrift at the moment. I was reading about them. They got anyway. We won't dwell on Charlton's problems. Actually, it leads us. It's a nice little segue into question number 10. Your most disliked player or team, or I don't know if hate's the right one. I might reword some of these questions a bit too strong. But clubs or players you dislike particularly? I mean, we touched on Lewis Grabban already.
Yeah,
but
no, I've got no players really, because I think players are players. The players that you normally hate are the ones you'd love to have in your own team.
It's often the reverse. Yeah, love and hate mean close emotions.
They're only bastards when they're playing for somebody else. But I think I've got the team I hate, and there are obvious reasons here, but it's Wigan. And Wigan Athletic. Yeah. I mean, they weren't even a league club till about 20 years ago. But they got their way through. But I've already told you when I took my lad there, and that year they beat us in the playoffs. I went to the Johnson's Paint Trophy final, when we played them there. And my story there, I did send you in a text once about this, but my story there, I took my missus because I couldn't get tickets from Millwall because they'd sold out.
Right.
We bought tickets through Wigan because they'd only sold 2,500 or 3,000.
Yeah, they had a very small contingent,
so
didn't they?
We ended up, and we come down to London for the weekend. She had a Millwall fleece on. Obviously, I had a Millwall fleece on. So we then went and stood amongst them. We were right on the very edge of the Wigan supporters.
Okay.
And they were pointless people, just doing whatever they do. And obviously, all the noises come from Millwall, and it was great fun. But it's a dour game, and she was chatting to the people next to her because she was born in a place called Ormskirk, which is about 10 miles from Wigan. So she's got a similar accent, but he sort of found them very interesting. Whatever they talked about, and then
Ormskirk matters.
And then as Wigan scored in the 90 whatever it was minute, they all jump up and scream, she's jumping up screaming with them, and I fucking looked at her, And I said, "For fuck's sake,
What are you doing?"
Christine!" And she looked at me like she wanted to kill me. And obviously having that, and then taking my lad there and getting beat in the playoffs, even though I think it was a 0-0 draw with them. I've always had that thing for Wigan because they've done us a couple of times, at different points over the years.
They were a bogey side. They were always in our way at one point.
The Wembley semi-final, there was
that's right.
A little bit of argy-bargy between our own fans. That was Wigan's fault as well. So they're just a team I can't stand. I mean, I don't mind the people because I don't have a lot to do with them. But, as a club, I think they bought their way through to where they got to. I think they've been found out, and even now they've got more problems, haven't they? And
they've always, they lurch on the edge of. I mean, but for their benefactor, what was his name?
Dave Whelan, wasn't it?
Whelan?
No.
Yeah, but for him, they wouldn't be where they are. But they were bogey opponents. They just seem to be always in our way at a certain point.
Well,
in time.
We're playing them in 2 weeks, aren't we? And
we've got them at the Den,
and they just appointed a new manager. So yet another team who gets a new manager comes down the Den, and you can, the writing's on the wall, isn't it?
Yeah,
and I'm bringing my lad down for that as well, so I can just see it all going tits up again.
Fingers crossed it don't.
No,
fingers crossed it don't.
Achtung, Millwall.
Final question, probably the longest question now. We ask our guests to name their best choice of best ever Millwall 11. So your choice of team over the years you've followed the club.
Well,
Jim,
I wrote a long list of players. Obviously, players.
Go on,
but I'll get to the sort of 11 anyway. And in goal, it was only ever Brian King for me. Even now, I look back on him with such appreciation and fondness because he was so good for us and recognised as a top class keeper, but he was never going to get in the England squad, or he was never going to get that number 1 jersey for England because he was at Millwall. But at the same time, he was a fantastic goalkeeper, wasn't he? He was
a brilliant goalkeeper. I think England, we were blessed with some great goalkeepers at that.
Yeah, well, you can never see us not having a world class keeper, could you, England? And
no, it just was unknown.
Yeah.
I'd say this. I mean, having been brought up my initial years with Brian King in goal, and then we had some good goalkeepers after King left. I always had an expectation that we had a good goalkeeper, Jim. I always felt that it was one area of the club where we were always strong, and we have been over the years. But that I think that was a consequence of Brian King being in goal for us. He just expected to have a brilliant goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think we've been very lucky as well, Nick, with keepers. I think we've had surprise keepers, Casey Keller, Tony Warner, who was Liverpool number 2. They all come to us and play really well, and like you say, I think we've always been good, and Bart recently. And and at the moment George Long, unproven, but he's not doing a lot wrong. So I think
league position speaks volumes, doesn't it? I mean, we're coming back to league football on Saturday. We're with us in 6th spot, so it's been a good run of form, and he's part and parcel of that. So
but I'd have Brian King as mine anyway.
Brian King's a great choice in goal. What about your back line? Are you going to go across?
Well, I start at right back, and I've ended up.
Okay.
And I've ended up putting Alan Dunn in there, funny enough, only because I'm trying to think some great right backs we've had, and like I say, the likes of Muscat and others that have been in there, but for whatever reason, Alan Dunn could never get himself shifted out. He used to play. He was a 6 or 7 out of 10 every game, and then every now and then,
great survivor,
great survivor, and there must be something in there. The managers must have seen something more in him. And I think when you look at him, and he used to look like a real thug, didn't he? He was a horrible looking lad that you just knew, had that ability to get in and hurt players and that. And
he was very Millwall, wasn't he? He was Millwall in one person,
I didn't see that much of him live, but I just, every time I used to watch him, I used to think, there's a player there that wears his heart on his sleeve and will give everything for it. And he played 300 odd games, I think, for Mill. So however many it was, he saw off so many people that there must be something more in him. So he'd be my right back anyway.
Good choice. I like that choice.
And then,
what about in the centre?
In the centre, that caused me a problem. Obviously, I'll have Dorney. He'd be in there straight away.
Dorney we mentioned, Alan Dorney.
And then I had a choice between Paul Robertson or Kitch, and I think with Robbo, I think I went with Robbo out of the two of them because I think probably never fully appreciated how good he was, and I don't even know if he appreciated how good he was, but he was alongside Darren Ward and players like that, he was he was cultured enough to score us goals, and defend with style rather than just be a thug who would bloody,
Yeah.
eat and kick and everything. Whereas I think with Barry Kitchen, he was a leader of men. I think with Robbo, he was more of a cultured footballer than people give him credit for.
It's an interesting choice because I think one of the things whenever you start to go to football, Jim, and we keep saying early 70s, I think you tend to regard the players of your first team as like gods, I mean, and I
Yeah,
suppose I've never shifted Kitch out of that place in my head. So it's quite interesting to go for a more recent player because Robbo was a good, very very good centre half, and I think possibly he could have played at a higher level, but stayed with us.
yeah.
I think it was for his whole career, if memory serves. I don't think he ever, apart from his early days, he didn't go anywhere else, did he?
Who? Robbo.
Robbo.
Yeah, well, he went to Portsmouth at the end, didn't he? I think, or
Oh,
Wimbledon
but
or
at the
somewhere.
end,
Yeah,
yeah,
but I think
yeah,
he
towards
was
the
there,
end,
hasn't
yeah,
he? Yeah.
for the bulk of the career.
And I think
Yeah.
if I didn't have Dorney in there, I think it would be Robbo and Kitch would be my two. But
Good
he
choices.
actually
Good
got in
choices.
the way, Dorney. But
Left back.
left
What
back,
about left back?
there's only one, and I think it don't matter what generation you go to. Ian Dawes is the one
Dorsey. Yeah.
that people would pull out, and you couldn't see a lot of weaknesses in him.
No.
Everything he touched was good quality, and for me, he was if you like in that back four, he looked fantastic. So for
Another
me,
cultured
yeah,
player, very similar to Dorney in that way. Yeah.
he was a wrong-footed fullback, but he could still
Mm.
play with his left as well. So he was better than what we'd ever had, I think, or what I'd ever seen, and just watching him, I was very very taken with him.
He signed for us when we were in the first division, so he felt like a real upgrade,
He's
a
a
little
coup, wasn't
glimpse
he?
of
Yeah,
the kind of player that we could hope to aspire to now that we'd made the top flight.
yeah, yeah,
It felt like we were upping our game in that way there, Jim,
yeah.
didn't it? With his signature, but I think he was a great, very very
And
intelligent
he was,
player.
wasn't he?
Always liked
He was too intelligent, for the general Millwall player. Like he was, yeah,
him.
very,
True,
very
yeah,
tidy.
very true. Let's go into
Right.
midfield. What about on
And again,
your
I'm going with four across the middle, and
okay?
my two right-sided players. I've chosen Keith Weller because I thought he was
Okay.
he was a striking winger. He was the guy from the right-hand side could score goals. He was mainly a striker anyway, but I think as his career developed, he turned into a right-sided sort of midfielder before right-sided midfielders existed. And,
Yeah.
and he could do that job. So I'd put him in there, but if you like an honourable mention, I'd give to Paul Eiffel because I think he was a player who'd come on leaps and bounds in Millwall, and really we saw probably the best of him, even though he went on to have a career away from us. I
Yeah,
thought he
yeah,
was
yeah.
absolutely fantastic, and as inconsistent as he was probably one of the flair players that did get a look in at Millwall and was appreciated. And I think appreciated more when he left than when he was here because there was things he used to do that were fantastic for me, and yet, like I say, he had a career away from us, and we realised how good he really was. So I think Graben come.
Yeah,
I think when he left, I think it's when Graben come in, and
I think he did.
he looked to have that
Yeah.
similar sort of ability, but just couldn't turn it on. And I thought at the beginning couldn't turn it on, but then over a little period of time, I thought he was a mainstay of our side for a couple of years.
Eiffel had an unpredictable quality. You never quite knew what you were going to get, but whenever Paul Eiffel got the ball, you sat forwards.
Well,
It's one of those players. You had an expectation that something might happen here.
Well, that semi-final goal against Sunderland, it was him. It
Yeah,
was his goal,
yeah,
wasn't it? And it was
yeah,
only Cahill finished it off, but it was all because of
yeah,
Eiffel nicking the ball and driving forward.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I'd have Keith Weller only because of the generation thing, and I have a great sort of appreciation of what he had, but I did love Paul Eiffel.
Well, there was. I mean, you predate me. I never saw Weller play, so I can only go by the comments that those like yourself and others have made about him. Very, very well respected, and very highly skillful
Yeah.
attacking midfielder who went on to Leicester and
Chelsea did Chelsea from us, didn't he?
Chelsea, yeah, that's right. And he played in America, didn't he?
Yeah, MLS.
Leicester,
yeah.
In the end, yeah, that's right. But great choices there. Let's keep going across. We're going to play with four-man midfield.
Yep. So the two centre midfielders, I was going to go for Alex Ray and Les Briley, but I ended up going with Tim Cahill and Terry Urlock only because chalk and cheese, and You know, if Cahill went forward, the one player he'd want to hang back and break anything down, including people, would be Terry Hurlock. You know, he was.
That's a crunching midfield there with Cahill. Cahill was no slouch.
No, but for Cahill, it was for me. It was the other side of his game. You know, he was a workhorse anyway, but he could just turn up, couldn't he? And suddenly the ball's in the net, and
a great goal getter, wasn't he? You know,
he just had a knack, didn't he? You know, and his understanding, I suppose, you know, showed more away from Millwall. But you know, if it was modern day player now, you know, how much could Millwall have sold him for now, rather than whatever they did 2 million? You know, he was so unusual.
Yeah.
But now you're looking at Fleming and you're looking at Cahill, and they're both sort of similar attacking midfielders. But I always thought Cahill was a more dynamic. You know, he was a running midfielder, wasn't he? Who would still get. He
was industrious, but he had skill. Yeah. So and he would produce goals.
I've picked it. I've picked him over Alex Ray, and for no other reason than he got more goals and probably had a little bit more flair about himself. But Alex Ray was absolutely fantastic player for us as well. You know,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, and you know, my biggest shame with all these players is they all moved on. You know, all the best players all moved on. We never saw them sort of from the beginning to the end of their careers. And
story of Millwall, Jim.
Oh yeah,
you know, that's one of the first. You mentioned Gordon Hill all the way back at the start of the conversation. One of my early exposures to the realities of Millwall, that we had this, you know, brilliant winger, and we sold him.
Yeah.
It's like, welcome to the rest of your life, Nick. You know,
what's that all about? But then what's that all about? At the two, I mean, I got Hurlock and Briley in the same, but Les Briley, when they played together, they were fantastic. You know, and Briley was
absolutely
a quality player. You know, he was the tidy player, but he loved putting his foot in as well. You know, and you listen to him talk now, and you wouldn't think he was that sort of player, would you? Because he's very cultured, very nicely spoken, and obviously he had Terry then, who was if there was a typical Millwall player, and all around the world, when I've said about Millwall and Millwall players, anybody from sort of 35 onwards knows Terry Hurlock, and that's have that appreciation.
We did a while ago. Neil and I did a what makes a Millwall legend show, and I mean, in playing terms, Terry Hurlock wasn't with us for that long, but he kind of epitomised the club, and I think every Millwall fan, certainly of our era, almost saw themselves in Terry Hurlock out there, and he had that kind of presence, and he was a very skillful player, but he obviously developed the kind of physicality reputation of his game, and also of the club. And I think for that reason, many people would pick him out as a Millwall legend for that reason. That he represented them.
I think his appearance worked for him as well. You know, he long black hair. He looked very sort of rough and ready anyway, didn't he? Before he actually stood on the field. Yeah. But I always remember, I can't even think which World Cup, would it have been the 90 World Cup or something like that, when either Robson or Wilkins got injured, and they were then talking about a replacement, and his name kept cropping up, you know, as a perfect replacement to go in, and he didn't go in the end, but what a fantastic player for us. And even when he came back, he was still probably not as good as he had been, but he was still revered by everybody, wasn't he? You know, because he's still Terry Hurlock, and
he always will be. And he remains highly thought of to this day.
Yeah,
great choice. And of course, in England B international. I don't know if he ever made the full England side,
which means nothing now, but it used to be massive, wasn't it? You know,
it was a big deal.
Well, the night before the cup final, they used to have an English football league against the English B, didn't they, or something like that? You know, as a representative game. So and he was. You know, he was always my type of player, I suppose, and most Millwall supporters type of player, Terry. So
much loved and very skillful, more skillful than perhaps was always given the credit for. Who's your fourth midfielder?
It's my left-sided midfielder, Gordon Hill, because it's absolutely fantastic to watch as a young man, and
Merlin,
a lad who could just beat players. You know, in a phone box, he could get past 2 or 3, couldn't he, and still come out with the ball and then deliver crosses. And I think I've mentioned it to you, you know, before, where I actually did a football course where Gordon was on it, and we're the same age, and you know, it was me sort of labouring to get around the pitch and everything. Gordon limping, you know, 2 bad knees, but he's just still beating players for fun, you know, and he wouldn't even touch the ball and he'd beat you. You know, and it's absolutely fantastic, and a lovely man. I've kept in touch over the years through that, and
Yeah.
and I always found it, and he was always one of my favourite players, which made meeting him and sort of getting on with him a little bit even better. But he was a fantastic player, and probably more appreciated once he'd gone, to United,
Manchester United.
and people could see what he could do, and playing for England, and he was.
England international, full international.
But he was one of ours, wasn't he? And that's the thing,
Yeah.
Whenever you meet these people, and I've met a few ex-Millwall players in the time, and everybody loves Millwall. If they're an ex-player, they love Millwall. There's something about the club, and it's in their blood anyway, isn't it? Somebody like Gordon and players like that who grew up in their learning years get what the club's about, and never forget that either.
No, I think you're right. I think some players just fall in love with us and remain that relationship remains. And he went on to great things. But he played out his career in the USA.
Yeah, another one. Yeah,
and I think he's based over there now.
He's got his own football academy out there now. And again, he's in his 60s and just enjoying life as an ex-footballer, I think. So yeah,
good luck to him. Good luck
and also very funny, wasn't he? Very funny man.
He was. He did had a Norman Wisdom style,
and he was still on that course. He was still doing it. He was still tripping over and doing his normal.
Well, when you get a good line, you got to keep at it.
Yeah. Okay.
So. Are you going to play up front on your 11 then, Jim?
And again, for me, it was sort of quality and quality. I've got Teddy Sheringham and Neil Harris.
Absolutely.
I think it's if any team that had one of them in would be quite happy, but if you got them both together. And I mean, you talk about Teddy Sheringham's intelligence as a player. It showed as he was in his 30s and 40s. He was just such an intelligent lad. And when he was a younger player, remember he got doubted, didn't he, by a lot of people as to whether he'd make it.
Slaughtered from the halfway line. Yeah. Certainly, people would be on his back.
But then he got better, and again, he had his years, and he had his loyalty to Millwall at the time. I think they got tested.
I think he still does. I think
he got tested a little bit later, didn't it? Yeah, it's
pantomime quality to some of that. I mean, his contribution is second to none, in my opinion. I think anyone that watched us get promoted in 87, 88, Jim, you can't. I don't know. You can never forget that season, and Teddy was an integral part of it. He was also one of the first Millwall strikers I ever saw. I remember seeing that would actually show intelligence to kind of pull wide and make runs on the flanks rather than being the straight down the middle man, the traditional centre forward. But Teddy would often drift wide and put the ball back into the box for Cascarino, which is quite something. I remember being really struck by that.
I think the thing that stood out with him, he wasn't the quickest, he wasn't the biggest or anything, but he was just so tidy. And I always thought it was a real sort of testament to his abilities when Cantona left United, and people couldn't see how he would get replaced, and yet they replaced him with Teddy Sheringham, which masterstroke by Ferguson. But Brian Clough loved him and bought him from Millwall to go to Forest, and then Ferguson loved him and took him there, and then England loved him and put him up front with Shearer. So whatever anybody ever says about it, absolutely fantastic player. That played. I think he got a maximum 100% out of himself. Over the years and just was all quality, wasn't he?
Absolutely. And success at Millwall, success at to some level, I suppose, at Forest, but certainly at Manchester United and then Tottenham after that. And then the rest of his career we won't talk about.
He went down the toilet then, didn't
he? Neil Harris. I mean, we've mentioned him on so many shows. But I always think his scoring record. I mean, the scoring record between him and Sheringham is incredible, Jim. I mean, he was a machine in his younger days in that third division winning season, the championship season when we got promoted. He was an absolute unit out there.
But he was. I think he was another one. He sort of came out and on league to us, and people couldn't believe how good he was very quickly. I think and he never stopped, did he? I think he disappeared to Forest for a season or two and come back and
Cardiff.
Was that where yeah. And you know what?
Did he finish up at Gillingham as well? Somewhere, but these were the kind of dark years in his career. But it was always a Millwall player, and his theatre was the den, wasn't it?
And I don't think he's lost his shine with us either, Nick. I know his management sort of ended probably a bit sour for him than than the club, but at the same time, I think he'll still come back and he'll still be Neil Harris, and everybody will love him, and he'll always be that player that everybody loved, at that time, and in 30, 40 years' time, there'll be people talking about him, as being Neil Harris, and how lucky they were to see him.
Very nice bloke as well.
Yeah.
Having spoken to him personally, very, very nice bloke. So, I mean, that's always interesting. I mean, you mentioned earlier on, Jim. I mean, having had the chance doing this podcast to speak to a few Millwall players, older Millwall players over the time, they're often really nice blokes, and it's a rare situation where you think, oh, I don't know about him. For the most part, I've always found every player that I've had the luck to speak to be really pleasant, really decent people.
But do you know what? I think they all have that connection straight away. If you talk to people about Millwall, once you get over the initial thing, you'll be all right. But if you talk to somebody who's been at Millwall, you don't have to get past that initial thing, because straight away you're in talking about the club and and what their vision of it. I met Malcolm Allen, and he was exactly the same, and he travelled around a few different clubs, and absolutely loved Millwall, and why wouldn't they? The appreciation they get if they perform, I think is fantastic for them, and probably don't get a lot of other places.
Well, I think it's one of the from an outsider's point of view, people that form a certain opinion of our club. But I always find it interesting. I follow Richard Shaw on Twitter, and I think he's made it quite well known when he first came to us, obviously from Coventry and then Crystal Palace. But he said with the reputation of the club, he didn't know what to expect. And he said to his wife, partner, if he got any hassle, he was at the point in his career where he just walk, he'd go, he wouldn't listen to it. But I think he went on to become player of the season, and still speaks very highly of the club even now on whenever he's interviewed. So there's something about the club, isn't there? There's something rough and ready, but something real and something authentic about us.
It's a working class club, and I think people wear their hearts on their sleeves, and I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I think if you know what people are about, then you can get an understanding. I think it's the prawn sandwich, if you like, clubs that you're not quite sure. I mean, if you went to Crystal Palace, you'd think they'd never have a day's problem in their life, would you? Or Charlton, you think that all their life is spent just sort of sat down listening. You just don't sort of you never get that in Millwall. And to be fair, like I said, I was in Dubai last week, and one of the good things about being a Millwall supporter, I had a Millwall t-shirt on at the time, and after the Wales game where everything was getting a little bit tetchy, some bloke said something behind me, so I walked over to him to ask him what he'd said. And
what's the problem?
But his mate straight away said, "Oh, you're Millwall." I said, "Yeah," and he shook me hand and that, and so it diffused the situation, Whereas maybe if I had my Crystal Palace shirt on,
it might have kicked off.
Well, I don't even never kicked off. I just started running, wouldn't I?
That's fantastic, Jim. We've reached the end of the line. I'm just going to read through your all-time 11 because I think it's worth just repeating. Got Brian King in goal. Across the defence, Ian Dawes, Paul Robinson, Alan Dorney, Alan Dunn. Midfield, Gordon Hill, Tim Cahill, Terry Hurlock and Keith Weller. And then up front, Teddy Sheringham and Neil Harris. That is some 11 there, mate. That is a fantastic
I think we go forward all right there, and we'd be well protected at the back. So I'll be right.
I think we'd have it sewn up on both ends of the pitch.
And if I had to manage him, Nick, I have to say, if I had to get a manager, I'd have George Graham, because I think
great manager, wasn't he?
He was the start of anything that was good about Millwall, and you watch him in future years or later years, and he never lost that sort of discipline that he had and his ability to motivate. So he started us, I think, getting us promoted and getting us up into the what was the old First Division. I know the Doc took us up there, but I think Graham was the catalyst for it all.
Well, I don't think it's any exaggeration, Jim, to say that George Graham saved Millwall Football Club, because we were on the brink of relegation to the 4th Division at one point. And I don't know what would have become of us with crowds of a couple of thousand at the Den, and who knows where that could have led us to.
Amazing.
So to avoid that, everything else, all the good stuff of the late 80s and the fact we're still here, can be pinned back to George Graham and his semi-miracle that he staged in saving us now.
We're going to the promised land, aren't we now? So. All because of George Graham.
Oh, because it's a long while back, and some will say, "What are you talking about?" But I believe it's true.
Yeah.
I think we're in for a good second phase of the season. Now we come back on Saturday, Jim, and we're sitting 6th in the championship. Probably will go wrong. Probably get beat at Sunderland. We'll have a depressive post-match show. But I think we've got every opportunity to this season.
Well, and you know what? It's not a great championship, is it, at all? Whoever goes up will probably come back down. But at the same time, for us, it is about getting up. It's not about anything else. Getting the playoffs, and 6th position a month ago didn't look sort of possible, did it? Or 2 months ago, as time is. But you look at how we got there, and suddenly a little change, a little tweak. It's the row at Southgate thing, isn't it? One little tweak will make all the difference, and suddenly we've got there. So how we've got there, I really don't know, and it's just that hope that says we all know what we can do, and will we do it? And if we get to March, April, and we're still in some sort of similar position, what a fantastic season we've had, and then we'll end up in 8th again.
Jim, it's been fantastic to meet you at last week.
Yeah, great to see you, Nick.
Great conversation. Really appreciate your time today.
More than welcome.
Jim Hackett is our listed line listeners. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant.
We'll be back with another edition, another day. Until then, from Jim and I, it's Arrivederci Milwall.
Yeah.
Bye.
Come on, you Lions.
Achtung, Millwall.